And what cryptocurrencies have the possibility of doing is restoring our monetary sovereignty. It is decentralized, free market technology controlled by nobody.
So I'm just going to go ahead and bring Matt up. I met Matt a few years ago. I think he's an absolutely neat fella. He's a visionary. He's an accomplished entrepreneur. He's a Christian. He's a leader, an author, and a millennial. But we won't hold that against him because he's going to teach us how to understand stuff that we have no idea on what it's about. Because, you know, I would always ask him and say, can you explain cryptocurrency to me? I don't understand it. Because to us, if we don't have something we can put in our hand, then it doesn't exist. So
Absolutely.
Please join me in welcoming Matt Moore.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Oh, you don't need that.
Yeah.
I'll take that for questions.
Okay. All right, guys, thanks for having me tonight. Just so you know, before we jump in, I'm going to say a prayer for Mr. Bridenstine. If you could bow your heads with me, please. Father, thank you for tonight. Thank you for this opportunity to come together with like-minded people who have a passion for this country and a passion for liberty, Lord. Right now, we lift up one of our patriots to you, and that's Wayne, Lord. We thank you, Lord God, that you are in control, that you are in the midst of his situation, Lord. We just speak life. Lord, we just declare and decree a full and healthy recovery, Lord. We thank you that we have full authority in the blood of Christ to speak to his lungs, to speak to his situation, and ask that you would heal his body, Lord, by the promises you've made to us, Lord. God, we thank you for a full recovery, and we expect a great report. In Jesus' name, amen. Amen. Well, as she was saying, I am involved in the community, and I love talking about business. I love talking about economics, and cryptocurrency kind of falls into that. And so I'm kind of coming here tonight. It's going to be kind of a lecture style, but I do have a lot of visuals. I have a lot of videos to share. Some of them are funny. Some of them are very informing. And what I want you guys to realize is I'm going to be coming at this as a layman's term. I'm going to try really hard not to talk too technical. But I think this information here tonight is very important to understand because this is where the direction of our world is going. And we have two pathways that we can take in this direction. Either a world that is filled with nothing but tyranny due to the technology, or a world that is complementary and is actually excelling our personal liberty. And so what I want to share tonight are things to be on the lookout for, things to support, to stand behind, because as this technology evolves, much like the internet has changed the world. It has changed the way we communicated. It's changed the way that we have been able to share information with each other, the freedom of information. And what cryptocurrencies have the possibility of doing is restoring our monetary sovereignty and providing us the ability to be sovereign over our time, energy, wealth, and freedom once again. Many of you are constitutionalists. Many of you are very familiar with the Constitution. I am a big proponent of gold and silver. I'm also a big proponent of lead. So we had a couple of conversations here earlier. But our founding fathers had this vision for our country that was free from a central bank, that was money that was an asset and not a liability. And today what we have is the exact opposite. And so when you hear me sharing tonight about the economy or about money or about policies, I am a supporter and lover of our president. I do back our president. But some of the things that you'll hear me say tonight might sound critical, but it's not because of his economic policy. Because you can have a great builder and you can build a wonderful house. But if that house is built on a foundation of sand due to the fundamentals of the money that we use, then the rest of it is in jeopardy. And so in order to understand cryptocurrency, I want to share a video. So if you could turn your attention to the screen, I'm going to share just a quick video about money and the difference between what is currency and money, because this will really build a foundation for you to understand why we need cryptocurrency and where we've been. A lot of times we don't know the difference. Many people don't know the difference between what is money and what is actually currency and what makes them different. Because in that scenario, in those explanations and in that understanding, it tells us a lot about our world. It tells us a lot about our freedom and the foundations that this world is built on.
In fact, money is such an important topic. Apart from salvation, it's one of the most important topics in my mind that we could learn about, that we could understand, because money represents our freedom, it represents our time, it represents our wealth and our energy. And these things, the only thing that's truly scarce in this world is our time and our energy. And if the system in which we are using is enslaving us, is the chains to our freedom, to our energy, to our time, then it is a injustice. It is wrong, because the system we use is not what our founding fathers set us up to use in the beginning, due to what they learned through this process. But when I hold these up and I say, what's the difference between money and a currency? Well, currency is like the flow of energy. It's like the flow of our output, of our ability. And a lot of times we make the mistake for using it as a store of value. And the only difference that makes between a money and a currency really comes down to these core traits, which is both of them are a medium of exchange, both are a unit of account, both are portable, durable, and they're also divisible and fungible. In other words, they can be interchangeable. The only difference between a currency and a money is store of value. See, things like silver and gold and Bitcoin, to be specific, they are limited in supply. There's only so much of it that can actually be made, that can actually be mined, that's in existence. It's hard money. It's a hard asset. These things, currency, pieces of paper, they're emitted and borrowed. Our government borrows this from a central bank, which has shareholders, which they earn 6% off of loaning money to the American government, which this money is then printed into existence or created into existence out of thin air. So essentially what happens is, if you borrow the first dollar into existence and you owe interest on that dollar from that central bank, where are you going to get the second dollar to pay for that interest? Well, you have to continue to borrow again. So it's a perpetual system of debt that requires more and more spending. And that's why this talk of balanced budgets and paying down our debt, with the system that we have, it is not a likely scenario or a plausible scenario, because what happens is there's always more debt than there is currency in the system. So if you make any substantial effort to pay down the debt, that whole system collapse in a deflationary collapse. So the only option they have is to continually spend and to continually borrow and go deeper into debt and hyperinflate the money to where the money continues to lose value, or I should say the currency loses value. Again, this piece of paper, the US dollar, or the AKA Federal Reserve note, because this is really constitutionally not what a dollar is supposed to be, it has lost 98% of its purchasing power. Back in the 60s and 50s, when people were actually paid with real money, real silver quarters, they were paid $1.25 an hour. I know that sounds crazy, but guess what? If you take this silver today and you take that melt value, though that $1.25 that they earned in silver, and you melt that down, the melt value of that is greater than $17 now. So it's very evident that wages are not keeping up with prices, with inflation, because as the money supply continues to increase, the marketplace realizes that there's more money in the system, so prices have to rise. And so if you're holding this stuff in the bank and all your assets are in dollars, well then your wealth is going to be eaten alive. There's a reason why $20 worth of groceries in 1998 could have bought you a full cart of groceries, versus where today we go to the store and we need at least $100 to have a full cart of groceries. This is just one example of rising prices and inflation, and the simple fact that wages are not keeping up with this. We are being robbed. And here's insult to injury. Is that we pay taxes, okay? We spend more of our time, more of our energy, and we pay these taxes to the government. Well, the government, who borrowed this money from a central bank, okay, that created it out of nothing, who earns 6% off of this money each year, what happens is we pay our taxes and we have to pay back that bank. The government has to pay back the central bank in the interest that's owed. Okay, so that is even more of a Ponzi scheme. It's even more of a fraud. And so I would say, how are you storing your money? How are you making sure that you're going to be set for the future? Because historically, all fiat paper currencies have never lasted the test of time. They always go to zero. And we went through it already once in America. When we had the Continental Dollar during the American Revolutionary War, we printed that and hyperinflated that to oblivion because we wanted to pay for the war against the British. But nobody wanted to take those dollars anymore. That's why we came up with the phrase, it's not worth a continental dollar. So the Founding Fathers knew that this was important, to be able to have a form of money that holds and sustains its value. And that's why in the Constitution they wrote that only gold and silver could be considered as money. So the dollar was actually a measurement of actual silver and gold. And now, today, we have abandoned that. In the 70s, in the 1970s, when Nixon fully took us off the gold standard and by definition became a true fiat currency, essentially what happened is the dollar became an instrument, a complete instrument of debt. And now we are on a timeline. You know, every fiat currency usually does not exist past 50 years of existence. I mean, there are a couple of scenarios where they've gone longer, but at the end of the day, they all fail. So what makes us think that the U.S. or the Federal Reserve note that's printed from the central bank or created from the central bank, what makes us think it's going to be any different? Okay, what makes us think that this $20 is going to have the same buying power 20 years from now as it does today? Because history is a guide, guys. The money keeps losing value. We're getting to the end of the timetable. Okay, not only that, but the dollar has been the world reserve currency. People have been required, countries have been required to hold dollars, to buy oil, to use it in international trade. We have tried to create a demand for dollars, and that's been our number one export. But as soon as this gig is up, all these dollars are going to come home to roost, and we're going to have hyperinflation that's just going to go out of control. The next financial crisis that we're going to have, whether it's a recession or depression, the only answer that they have is to lower interest rates, either to negative interest rates, which is another story, which is ridiculous. Parts of the world are doing it, or they're gonna print more money, quantitative easing. What are you putting your faith in? Are you putting your faith in a piece of paper, or something that actually has intrinsic value, or is limited in supply? Bitcoin, cryptocurrency, whole nother topic. I'm just talking about a general idea here. But I'm talking about all this because I'm passionate about it. I think it's an injustice that the American people are being robbed of their wealth, not just through the taxation to pay back a central bank that's creating money out of thin air and earning a profit off of it, but also the simple fact that people, they're not keeping up with inflation. I mean, if you keep your money in the bank, you'd be lucky to get 2% interest on that money in the bank. And the Federal Reserve has come out and said that every single year their goal is 2% inflation. That means that they're going to take away 2% of the value of the money that you're actually holding every single year. It just doesn't make sense, guys. You need to do your homework. You need to learn the difference, because your freedom, your wealth, your time, and your energy depends on it. I don't want to see you robbed. I don't want to see you in a challenging situation in the future, because we are going to have hard economic times. We have a lot of things converging in today's society when it comes to monetary history, and things don't look pretty. But if you position yourself in the right way, you can position yourself for the greatest wealth transfer the world has ever seen. This giant bubble of liquidity that's been created worldwide. When people lose confidence in it, and when this thing bursts, all this liquidity is going to go racing to limit it to hard assets limited into supply, so they can try to preserve their purchasing power. Gold and silver has maintained its purchasing power for thousands of years. You can take the same amount of silver, the same amount of gold, and buy almost the equivalent of goods and services as it did back in ancient Egypt. So what money are you using? What money are we using as a country? Is it a good store of value over a long period of time? I can tell you that these do not.
All right, so that video was a little lengthy, but I think it's important that we talk about that, because what Bitcoin does in a digital age is it takes the principles of gold and silver, and it allows us to be, again, like I said, sovereign over our time, energy, freedom, and wealth. And I think for a digital age, in complementary, because I'm a big fan of gold and silver, in complementary of gold and silver, Bitcoin can play a role in which, if you look back, even Thomas Jefferson, I want to read this quote to you. In 1798, Thomas Jefferson wrote to John Taylor. He said, "I wish it were possible to obtain a single amendment to our Constitution. I would be willing to depend on that alone for the reduction of the administration of our government to the genuine principles of our Constitution. I mean an additional article taking from the federal government the power of borrowing. I now deny the power of making paper money or anything else a legal tender." And what Thomas Jefferson was saying there was he was witnessing already the erosion of our monetary system even back in 1798, identifying that the simple fact that the government had the power to issue and declare what is money was going to give them the ability to grow and expand to unprecedented levels. There was a great debate during the ratification of the Constitution about the federal government being able to admit bills of credit. And due to their experience with the continental dollar, they actually chose not to put that in the Constitution for the federal government. However, the states were only able to accept gold and silver as a payment of debt. So the simple fact, and this is my personal opinion, I'm not a constitutional attorney or anything, but I would say that the simple fact that our money is no longer backed by gold and silver, any tax or any fee that the state government accepts or takes or initiates is unconstitutional because it's not gold and silver. And I think they could have gotten away with it because our money used to be backed by it, and those bills that we used were just a note, a representation of that gold and silver. And Bitcoin, what Bitcoin does is it creates the ability for us to step away from government having the power over money, from government having the ability to issue money. And so I asked the question, why is Bitcoin money? Bitcoin shares the same properties of gold, but is more superior in its portability, divisibility, and its limited nature. Bitcoin's monetary policy is known in advance and is predictable. It has a limited supply built into the code. Only 21 million will ever be created. It's an apolitical money tied to no nation, person, or company. It is decentralized free market technology controlled by nobody. It's the world's largest, most secured, decentralized ledger built for a digital age. Bitcoin is both money and a payment processing network. So recently we've been seeing this whole thing from fringe to mainstream. A lot of us have been hearing the word Bitcoin. Even institutional players are getting in the game, creating financial products built around Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies. And I just want to share a couple of these headlines with you so you can understand the weight and magnitude of where our world is going. Cryptocurrencies, in this right here, you'll see that ICE, which is a huge corporation, it's the parent company of the New York Stock Exchange. They have created a platform for futures contracts, and they will actually pay out in actual Bitcoin. Fidelity Digital Asset Services is now engaged in a full rollout of its custody and trading services in Bitcoin. Right here in the next one, you'll see that the CME Group, which is a Chicago-based exchange operator, said that its Bitcoin futures contracts, they grew in popularity last quarter with a number of open contracts up 61% from a year earlier because of a growing demand from institutional investors. Asked whether those involved in Bitcoin had satisfied their initial concerns regarding a Bitcoin ETF, Securities and Exchange Chairman Commissioner Jay Clayton stated that the short answer is yes, but there is work left to be done. A Bitcoin ETF is only a matter of time. Next one, you'll notice that after 14 months work at the United Nations Plaza in New York, UNICEF announced a crypto fund, a prototype that lets an agency accept Bitcoin and Ethereum donations and invest them directly into blockchain startups. TD Ameritrade over here will now let customers trade Bitcoin futures. In June, Last June, Bitcoin became the world's 8th largest currency, bigger than Russia's currency. In April 2017, Japan made Bitcoin legal tender. And right here you can see that Yale University has the second largest endowment in higher education and is among the investors that helped a new fund focused on digital assets, raising $400 million. In 2018, Ohio gave businesses the ability to go to the website ohiocrypto.com and register to pay everything from cigarette sales tax to employee withholding taxes in Bitcoin. Eventually, this initiative in Ohio will trickle down to individual filers. So with these headlines, why is the world embracing Bitcoin, this new technology? Well, it's an opportunity to make profits. That's the first one. A lot of people just want to make profits and trade it. It's a non-correlated asset to traditional markets. Despite it falling with the stock market recently, it has a history of not being consistent with the stock market. And much like in 2008 when we had the financial crisis, safe havens like gold and silver tanked 30% and then skyrocketed shortly after once they initiated all these stimulus programs. And I think Bitcoin's going to do the same thing. It's a hedge against a failing and finite fiat money system. It's decentralized and controlled, like I said. What funny thing about Bitcoin is it's the first time in human history, if you actually look in the dictionary, you won't find the word unconfiscatable, because we've always been able to confiscate things from people. But with Bitcoin, it's digital information that lives all over the world on millions of computers, and all you have to do in order to move your money is to know your private key. You can memorize that private key or seed phrase and be able to go anywhere in the world, and no government, no person can take that away from you. So it really allows you to have unconfiscatable money. It's an open source system that provides trust. It's a system of consensus that is built on mathematics. It's the Internet of Value. Essentially, it's a peer-to-peer system in which there's no middleman required in order to do a transaction. So if I wanted to send Rhonda some money, all she had to do was show me her address, and I send it to her address, and there's no middleman that gets to tell me whether I get to send her money or not, despite her political views, despite her, her sexual orientation. It doesn't matter where she's coming from. If she was a missionary in Iran, I could send her money, and the government couldn't stop me. It's the hardest form of money that the world has ever known, in the sense that gold and silver is limited, and we have a rough idea of what's above ground and below ground. But with Bitcoin, the code dictates how much of it will actually come into existence. And with millions of computers around the world, there's a financial incentive in order to keep the integrity of that network. In order to theoretically change the amount of Bitcoin that could be in existence, you would have to get thousands, if not millions, in the future to decide to adopt a new code from developers that would initiate the increase in the money supply. But who in here, if you're holding money, would want to raise your hand and say, you know what, I'm going to opt into that system, and 98% of us are going to agree to that? Well, you wouldn't, because you would be devaluing your financial holdings. So it does have a safeguard in place. It has first mover advantage. In other words, it has network effect. It's an apolitical money birthed by the free market. In summary, Bitcoin is valuable because it's the world's first peer-to-peer decentralized and unconfiscatable asset built on the world's strongest computer network. It's the safest and smartest tool for transferring value in a digital age, and it is personal monetary sovereignty. So the real question is, how does this work? And I want you guys to turn your attention to the screen, because I think I could stand up here and I could give you a breakdown of how this network works and how it all comes together. But I found that when I use visuals and when I use a video, it's so much easier for people to be able to conceptualize how this works, because it gives you a visual. So if you turn your attention to the screen, I'm going to go ahead and play this video.
So how does it work and what's the point? Cryptocurrencies like Bitcoin allow people to transact with each other using the internet anywhere on Earth. Instead of having an account number like a checking account or a credit card, cryptocurrencies are much more secure because they have a public key and a private key. It's like having two account numbers, one for deposits and another for withdrawals. You'll often see them displayed as a string of characters or a scannable code. This level of security means that you could put your public key on a billboard if you wanted to, and your funds would still be secure. The only thing other people can do with your public key is send funds to you. It's your private key that gives you access to your funds. As long as you keep control of your private key, your funds are absolutely safe, and theft and fraud are virtually impossible. But, just like cash in your wallet, you need to keep it safe to prevent it from being stolen. Its security is entirely your responsibility. Cryptocurrencies can also give you privacy. Just like cash, you don't have to disclose any personal information when you spend them. By contrast, a credit card has your name, account number, and expiration date. These act like a public key, but the equivalent of your private key, your signature and security code, are displayed in plain sight. This is just plain stupid. I've toured 5 national money museums, and while I was at one of them, I saw a group of young students on a school outing. I can just imagine that someday in the future, a group of kids will be standing around the credit card display, pointing and laughing at the incredible stupidity of the system we once used. And this is the point. Cryptocurrencies are light years ahead of our current technology. Since Bitcoin was the first cryptocurrency, I'm going to use it as our example, and I'll expand on our earlier description of a distributed ledger. But first, where does Bitcoin get its value? Bitcoin is brand new to mankind in that it's both a currency and a payment network simultaneously. And this is where Bitcoin gets its value. The immense network of computers all around the world running the Bitcoin distributed ledger. Every second of every day, these computers are keeping the ledger updated and in full consensus via a system that incentivizes them to process and confirm transactions. The system that Bitcoin runs on is called blockchain. Think of it as a modern version of an old-fashioned bookkeeping ledger, but instead of a handwritten list of entries and calculations, a blockchain is a digital list of entries and calculations. A block is simply a bundle of transactions. Think of a block as a whole page of transactions in the old-fashioned ledger. A blockchain is just a chain of blocks. It's the same as a whole series of pages in the old-fashioned ledger. Easy, huh? Here's how it works. The Bitcoin blockchain actually exists in every one of the millions of computers on the network as exact copies of each other. However, for this example, so that we can zoom in and you can really see just how a blockchain works, I'm going to show it as one giant blockchain in the middle of a small network of computers. Let's follow a pizza transaction with Bitcoin. When the transaction occurs, it first appears on the network in a pool of unconfirmed transactions, along with thousands of others from all around the world. Millions of different computers from the network then gather some of these transactions and place them in their own blocks. The computers are all creating blocks constantly in the hope that theirs will be the next one added to the official chain. A new block is added to the chain every 10 minutes or so when one of the computers wins the right to have its block recognized as the next in the chain and is rewarded with a prize of newly created bitcoins. The way a computer wins the prize is by trying to guess the answer to an extremely difficult math problem. In fact, the problem is so difficult that even with millions of computers making guesses billions or even trillions of times per second, it still takes roughly 10 minutes to find the answer. Once one of the computers guesses the correct answer and wins, all of the millions of computers on the network that did not win are instructed to throw away all the work they have done, update their ledgers with the block from the winning computer, and start again with a new math problem. In doing so, the computers use an immense amount of power and cost a literal fortune to run. So why do they do it? Because it can be very profitable. This is where the term mining for bitcoins comes from. Instead of striking gold by mining for precious metals in the wilderness, these computers are hoping to strike Bitcoin by mining precious numbers on the blockchain. But when these millions of computers are selecting transactions to go into their blocks, they aren't all selecting the same transactions, and not all the blocks are the same size. Some contain more transactions, some contain less. When blocks are thrown away, the transactions they contain go back into the pool of unconfirmed transactions. This means that the probability of a transaction being confirmed and staying in the order it was confirmed in is not absolute, but it becomes more of a certainty every 10 minutes as new blocks are added. In fact, for very large transactions, it's suggested that you wait for 6 or more blocks, about 60 minutes, to be absolutely certain that a payment is permanent.
All right. So that kind of gives you a breakdown of how the blockchain network works that Bitcoin is built on top of. If you didn't understand it, or if you want to watch it again, I'm pretty sure they're going to post it. I could send you the link. It takes a lot of learning. This is a new technology, and there's going to be a sharp learning curve. However, again, going back to the utility of it, this is really what I want to emphasize is the utility of this network. Imagine having the ability to be able to do some of the things that I'm talking about earlier. And John Stossel did an excellent interview, and I want to share this real quick.
But even if Libra's crushed, says Brockwell, other digital currencies like Bitcoin can't be stopped.
You want to send money to Russia to a family member, it's going to be censored. You want to send money to a relief effort in Venezuela, it's going to be censored. You want to use Bitcoin for that, your money will get through. That's an incredibly powerful tool. That gives people back the freedom to spend their money where they want to spend it.
Bitcoins are generated all over the internet by anybody.
It's the first currency we've ever seen that is decentralized.
They can't shut it down.
Exactly, and that's why it's still around, because they haven't been able to have these hearings. They haven't been able to call on the CEO of Bitcoin and say, you better cease and desist. There is no server to unplug. There is no company to shut down, no CEO to throw in jail, so it persists. That's really exciting.
Digital currencies live on thousands of individuals' computers, so no government can stop them by pressuring any one company.
Are you looking to understand Bitcoin or cryptocurrencies? Are you looking to buy and get into the space? Reach out to me. My website's in my bio and on this video. I would love to help you out.
You'll have to ignore me. I make these videos all the time. I post them. If you follow me on social media, I am putting out education like you wouldn't believe it. Some people probably get tired of seeing my stuff. But I just wanted to share some of this because we have an emerging asset class. What we're experiencing is something the world has never seen before, and the world is still trying to assert value to it. There's still a discovery process. The liquidity of this marketplace is extremely small compared to the liquidity of some of these companies that are in the stock market and even different money supplies. And so when I was speaking at the Senate during an interim study sharing this stuff, I wanted to paint the picture of just where we were or are in the evolution of this technology. We are still extremely early despite that it's been around for 10 years. And I'm going to read some of this. Bill Gates is worth, and these are old numbers, so due to the market crashing in the last couple days, so these numbers are probably a little off. But Bill Gates is worth $90 billion. Jeff Bezos has a net worth of about $117 billion. Today, Bitcoin's market capitalization is around $148 billion. Today, the entire cryptocurrency market cap is around $222 billion. Amazon is worth $1 trillion. Apple is also worth $1 trillion. And the USD in circulation is about $1.5 trillion as far as the physical bills. The gold market cap is $7.8 trillion. Global physical money, the whole world physical money, or the currency, is about $34.4 trillion. And the entire global, or the global stock markets is about $67.5 trillion. And then you also have the entire global money supply, and that is about $86 trillion. A lot of people will compare the 2017 explosion in price of cryptocurrencies to the dot-com bubble. However, I think it's a wrong comparison to make. For example, during 2017, Bitcoin had a larger percentage rise than the dot-com bubble, but at the height of the dot-com bubble, the market capitalization was $6.7 trillion. And that was fueled primarily just American money. At the height of the crypto bubble in 2017, the market capitalization was $800 million, and that was fueled by global retail money and not institutional money. 2019 was the year that the institutional money started building on-ramps into this marketplace, creating financial tools and vehicles in order for people to invest in it. Cryptocurrency is not just an emerging industry, it's a whole new asset class, and the next cryptocurrency bull market is going to make the dot-com bubble look like a picnic. That's how early we are in this. Right here, you can see a chart of it's hard to see from here, but of Bitcoin's life cycle. Bitcoin has a process where every 4 years, it does a halvening. And that halvening, the newly minted supply that these computers are competing to create, gets cut in half. So when a computer solves a mathematical equation and wins the right to that newly minted Bitcoin, they get allotted a certain amount. And that will continue till about 2041 or 2140, something like that. And so we've got a long ways to go until we've mined all of them. Right now, there's about 18 million that have been mined. There's about 4 or 5 million that have been lost forever. But the unique thing about this is that it has a more deflationary effect on its money supply, and so people are actually incentivized to hold it because you want to save it, and as you'll see throughout the years, every time it hits its halvening, shortly after its halvening, the supply decreases and demand continues to go up. Well, what happens when supply decreases and demand goes up? Price in dollars does go up. And so this last bull market that we had in 2017, we saw a height of about $20,000 per Bitcoin. Right now, Bitcoin is sitting around $6,000, and it's projected that when it goes through this halvening process in May, a year following May, we may see a $100,000 Bitcoin. And if you look at the state of the economy right now and what the Federal Reserve is wanting to do to fix the problems that we're experiencing, their only answer is more quantitative easing, lower interest rates, most likely negative, and they're going to continue to prop the system up. The Federal Reserve is going to become the buyer of last resort. And what happens is it's been said that when the market collapses, it first goes through a deflationary effect, and then the inflationary response is going to be even worse because it's going to continue to inflate. And what happens is when you continue to inflate, to try to inflate it, you're decreasing the value of your money because you're creating more of it. And so once people realize the end game of a fiat money system, they're going to take their capital and they're going to run to the exits where things are limited in supply so they can protect their purchasing power. Venezuela is just ahead of us in this game. Eventually, if we don't fix our monetary system and if we don't provide a system that's limited in nature, we will end up like Venezuela due to the way the system is set up now. Because like I said, every time that you create a dollar into existence and you owe interest on that, where are you going to get the second dollar to pay that interest? You got to borrow again. So eventually, it's all about faith and confidence, and people lose their faith and confidence in it. I want to go ahead and share this real quick.
What's up, crypto newbies, lovers, and experts? It's Matt with your Crypto Minute. Let's begin. Did you ever learn about the evolution of money? First, it's a collectible. Then it becomes a store of value. Then it becomes a medium of exchange. And then finally, a measure of value. Bitcoin is on that same path. Gresham's law states that when two types of money are in circulation and one has a greater intrinsic value, that one will be hoarded while the other one of lesser intrinsic value will be spent and kept into circulation. This process will continue until the people lose faith and confidence in the lesser money. Apart from being physical, Bitcoin has the same principles as gold, but more superior in its portability, divisibility, and limited nature. And due to the nature of government's fiat money, they have no choice but to continue to print until the value goes to zero. Essentially, what we are witnessing is a free market competing with the government's communistic monopoly control over money.
So going on to the next slide, I make the comparisons of gold and Bitcoin, and you guys might be asking the question, but being digital gold, it has the potential to see a multi-trillion-dollar market cap. If Bitcoin only consumes half of gold's market capitalization, the price could easily soar to $194,000. If we were to stack Bitcoin up to gold, how does it really compare? Here are just a few of pros and cons of Bitcoin. Bitcoin is scarcer than gold, and it will one day have a higher stock-to-flow ratio than gold. It's ideal for a digital world with artificial intelligence, with machines executing transactions between themselves. Imagine a world where you're driving your car to work, your autonomous car from Tesla, you park your car, you're sitting at your desk and you're working. Well, your car could be making money for you, so you send it off to go rideshare, go do Uber. Well, what happens is a person will pull out their phone, they'll use their cryptocurrency wallet, they'll scan it to the car's wallet, and once that destination or that trip has been completed via smart contracts and blockchain technology, that transaction will be executed with no bank validating or verifying a transaction, no person validating or verifying a transaction, and then what happens is the car will eventually have to refuel or recharge, so it'll go to the station, the pump's wallet will talk to the car's wallet, and these machines will be doing transactions between themselves with no person involved. And so if technology has an exponential and compounding growth, what we can expect to see in technology are machines working with each other, transacting economic value. That's really what this comes down to. What kind of vehicle represents that economic value the best? And so going back to the gold and silver explanation, Bitcoin's money supply, it's public. It's always known, and it's an easy way to send globally in minutes. So just for example, if I wanted to send a couple $1 million across the globe, how long do you think it would take for me to send that money from here to, let's say, South Africa? Well, it's probably going to go through 3 or 4 different banks. Each one of those banks are going to take their cut. It's going to take, like I said, 3 or 4 days, and the transaction fees.
Currency conversion.
What's that?
Currency conversion.
Currency conversion as well. And so what Bitcoin does is I can send money in a matter of minutes to my friend or to my vendor or to my client across the world in a matter of minutes for the fraction of the price of what the current banking system allows for. So what about gold? Well, here are just a few pros and cons of gold. Gold has 1,000 years of history and will be around for years to come. Gold will always be money. Constitutionally, gold and silver are the only things that should be money if we were to follow the Constitution. It's physical, and the world is familiar with it. Here are a few cons, though, of gold. It's heavy. It's not easy to use. Or store. In fact, if I was going to store large amounts of gold, I'm going to hire a lot of security. I'm going to have to put it in a vault. And if I try to send millions or billions of dollars in gold, just the security of the transportation of that and the cost of transporting that is going to be a lot. It's going to be huge. And it's also vulnerable to the audits of it being manipulated. So it requires a third party like a bank or government to hold large amounts of it safe. And once you give a third party the power to keep your money safe, who knows what they might do. They might eventually take us off the gold standard again. So it would just be repeating history all over again. So slide number 18. What are the big companies that are getting involved in this space right now? Overstock.com. I can go to overstock.com right now and buy anything I want with Bitcoin. Amazon is providing web services that offers blockchain tools to help companies that want to use distributed ledger technology but don't want to develop it themselves. Google, investments in a certain payment startup to instantly send and receive in different currencies using Bitcoin as an intermediary holding. HTC, Samsung, the list goes on. There's so many companies that are getting involved in this space. So just as the internet took market share from multiple industries, so will blockchain technology and cryptocurrencies. Money is just the first use case of this technology, but it will eventually disrupt every corner of the global economy. People will one day see the creation of the computer, the emergence of the internet, and distributed ledger technology, which is blockchain technology, as one single event in history. The world is being decentralized, and we will build, or at least I hope we build, open peer-to-peer systems that are decentralized with no middleman and controlled by nobody and validated by mathematics. So what are central bankers saying? See, I talked about two paths that we could go down. We could go down one that promotes freedom, that's decentralized, or we could go and blindly accept a cryptocurrency or digital tool that's provided by a central bank or government. So let's just listen to some of these interviews.
On the digital currency, we have set up a task force, and we will accelerate the effort of this task force. My personal conviction is that given the developments we're seeing, not so much in the Bitcoin segment, but in the stablecoins projects, and we only know of one at the moment, but there are others being explored and underway at the moment, we'd better be ahead of the curve.
Even cryptocurrencies such as Bitcoin, Ethereum, and Ripple are vying for a spot in the cashless world, constantly reinventing themselves in the hope of offering more stable value and quicker and cheaper settlement.
What kind of threat does this pose to the traditional banking system?
Well, I think you have incumbents, the banks, commercial banks, and you have the disruptors. And clearly the disruptors are having an impact on the incumbents.
So that was the president of the ECB, okay, in Europe. Now this one is Mark Carney, who was the president of Canada's central bank, or governor of Canada's central bank, and is now the governor of England's central bank. Let's hear what he had to say. This was in Jackson Hole, Wyoming, just this last year at a conference held by the Federal Reserve in Wyoming.
You dropped a bombshell in the luncheon there, almost like a mic drop, and you said we need to go to a global virtual currency.
You don't just jump to something new overnight. And what we want in a multipolar world, I think we'd agree that we've got the European engine, we've got the Chinese engine, we've got the US engine of this economy. Multipolar world, you need a multipolar currency. The question is, how do you get there?
All of the pressure on the difference in growth around the world would not fall on the dollar exchange rate.
Yeah.
It would be spread out if it was a global basket of currencies.
It would be spread out as a global basket of currencies. It's better for the system as a whole. It's better. It raises that equilibrium level of interest rates.
Right.
It gives central banks more policy, but it gives people who are watching greater returns on their savings.
Cryptocurrency is going to change everything. Please, for goodness sake, learn the differences. Contact me at my website. I'd be glad to help you out.
So look at these headlines here. These are news headlines in The Guardian, The Washington Post, and this is a cryptocurrency news website that I frequent all the time. So you just heard from Mark Carney. China is set to be the first country to initiate a cryptocurrency nationally. That's the path that they're on. Okay, top Federal Reserve officials have been actively debating a cryptocurrency, and then also. The top Federal Reserve, Rob Kaplan, was quoted saying that the U.S. Central Bank is actively looking and debating the issuance of a digital currency amid growing worries among current and former regulators that the dollar might be at risk of losing the world reserve currency status. So I want you to look at these charts here. This is very important to realize, okay, guys? The American dollar became a world reserve currency after World War II, okay? A world reserve currency, when a nation has been given that privilege, does not typically hold that status more than 80 to 90 years, okay? You do the math, we're about 75 years into that, okay? The next economic trend that we need to look at, the dollar. Since the creation of the Federal Reserve in 1913 has lost 98% of its purchasing power, okay? We're getting to the end of this. And lo and behold, what I've been talking about for months, if not years, everybody wants to talk about the low unemployment rate. It's great, I get it, it's wonderful. But every time we get below 4%, a recession is shortly to come, okay? We're over $23 trillion in debt. There's no way for us to pay this back. Deficits are going to become irrelevant, okay? But the question is, does President Trump know this? I think he does, okay? You'll hear him say things on the news. I look at it and I go, that's not what you said on the campaign trail. He can't say what he knows. Look at this video and you'll see what I mean.
The stock market reaches all-time highs during Trump's impeachment. The economy is doing great. Nope. The stock market is in a bubble, and what goes up must come down, and President Trump knows it.
The only thing that looks good is the stock market, but if you raise interest rates even a little bit, that's going to come crashing down. We are in a big, fat, ugly bubble.
This is why I voted for President Trump in the first place. I'm not trying to be a Debbie Downer. I'm trying to be a realist. The economy is fragile, and Trump knows it.
I'll tell you what, if I ever got impeached, I think the market would crash. I think everybody would be very poor.
The economy is being fueled by easy money creation and lower interest rates to encourage more spending, more debt, more speculation, and more stock buybacks. The economy is not sound. Why did the Federal Reserve have to cut interest rates? Why is President Trump now calling for negative interest rates if the economy is so good? Our national debt has reached new highs. The Federal Reserve is bailing out big banks night after night since September with billions of dollars. This is a fragile illusion built on funny money and speculation. Don't buy the lies. The economy died in 2008.
Their estimation was that by 2 o'clock that afternoon, $5.5 trillion would have been drawn out of the money market system of the United States, would have collapsed the entire economy of the United States, and within 24 hours, the world economy would have collapsed.
When Trump says things like this,
the stock market just hit another all-time in history high, meaning 401ks and jobs. Everybody's getting rich.
He's trying to buy time to get reelected. By no means do I want a socialist to be our president, and I would much rather have President Trump be reelected. But he knows this is a game of faith and confidence.
We used to have a very, very solid country because it was based on a gold standard. We don't have that anymore. There is something very nice about the concept of that. It would be very, very hard to do at this point, and one of the problems is we don't have the gold.
By no means did Trump make this mess. But let's just pray that he has a plan to bring us back to sound money and economics, because he knows the truth. He just can't say it now that he's president.
What President Trump said there is exactly what I've been saying. He just is reaffirming it, okay? He can't come out and say, guys, we're going to change our entire monetary system. Or he can't come out and say, you know what, the fundamentals of our economy are great, but our money system sucks. Because people would react badly to that. What he has been trying to do is buy us time. And what I also believe is that I've been expecting a major market downturn. This has been the largest economic expansion in U.S. history. And even though life doesn't necessarily repeat itself, it often eerily rhymes. And so what I've been trying to do with my message is trying to get people to realize that there are some fundamental things that are taking place that we need to know how to handle, that our politicians need to know how to address. And we as activists and as people in the community need to understand it, because when there is a crisis, which I believe that we're in, okay? I think what the coronavirus has done has popped the everything bubble, and it's one thing after the other. Supply chains are being disrupted. Financial institutions are starving for liquidity. The Federal Reserve just came out today and said that they're going to be bailing out the financial institutions in the repo market for $1.5 trillion, okay? And the market went up a little bit, but then it dropped again. It's going to take extravagant measures and money creation in order to try to reinflate what has just now been popped. And I think, I don't have the answer. I didn't know when this was going to happen. I just know that it was going to be inevitable.
I am encouraging a reformation. Mankind literally has the opportunity to create a true free market where money is decided by the market and not by a government or a central bank. Currently, malinvestment is rewarded, crony capitalism is encouraged, and big banks are always too big to fail. This world is being manipulated with easy money created from thin air from the elite few. Wealth inequality is amplified with this system of inflation, which steals wealth from the poor and rewards those closest to the money creators. Money printing and negative interest rates are going to be on the rise, and this is the only answer. The separation of state and church was great for our spiritual freedom, but the separation of state and money is great for our financial sovereignty. Let's create a real free market and not one controlled by a central bank or a government.
So, with all this chaos going on, can governments stop a free market money like Bitcoin? And I can tell you right now, a lot of our politicians already know the answer to that, and I want you to watch this video of not only a congressman, but the chairman of the SEC.
The question I have ultimately is, given the monopoly that our government has had on its fiat currency over all of these years and the issues around...
All governments have a monopoly over their currency. So let's
they typically
just
do.
Get out of this that we're special and different.
No, we're not special or different. The question, though, long term, do you think that regulators and politicians like yourself will allow the emergence and the sort of these new types of currencies if they don't look a lot like the regulations and guardrails that we currently have around fiat currency and money?
Well, I think there's no capacity to kill Bitcoin. Even the Chinese, with their firewall and their extreme intervention in their society, could not kill Bitcoin. So a distributed ledger, full and open, as in the essence of Bitcoin as a first mover in this space, the developer of this technology of blockchain and digital currencies.
So here's the chairman of the SEC.
While the SEC is one of a number of regulators who would have jurisdiction over Libra, can you speak to how the Libra announcement has affected how the SEC and other regulators are working to be responsive to and innovative to market developments and trends like cryptocurrencies?
The digitization and the digitization of the plumbing and other aspects of our financial system, including payment transfers, it is coming. The what I'll say, just the natural economic forces that it unleashes, taking fat out of the system, for lack of a better term, it's happening. But we should not be fighting that digitization, because if we fight it, it will go around us.
Well, thank you. That mirrors my feelings on it, and I assume that when you say it is coming,
I'm sorry, Senator, it's here.
This year.
It's here. It is here already.
Yeah, I see. It's here.
So in summary, we have a new era of money that's coming. Banks and governments want to issue their own crypto. What system will we choose? It's time for the separation of state and money, and let's once again become sovereign over our own time, energy, wealth, and freedom. That's why Bitcoin's important. We have to have a decentralized system that's controlled by nobody, that's open, that's honest, that's always accountable, and has a built-in monetary policy that's similar to gold for a digital age. I don't want a cryptocurrency issued from a government. I don't want a cryptocurrency issued from a private central bank, because if we do, we are subjects, and tyranny is the way of that. So thank you guys for letting me speak. If you guys have any questions, I'd be more than happy to answer.
I'll come around with a microphone, but my question is this. How do you invest in this? So let's say I have $1,000. What's the next step?
So there's multiple ways of investing in it, and this is where I come in, because I don't sell anything. I don't manage anybody's money. I'm not a financial planner. I'm not trying to touch anybody's money. But what I am trying to do is teach people how to fish, how to get into the marketplace, how to use the technology and learn about it. Because there is a learning curve, much like email, okay? My father didn't use email till 2005, but once he did, he's even using a smartphone now. So anything, he texts me, that's a huge improvement. But what my job is to teach people, okay, you can go on and exchange, and this exchange, which is a third party, can facilitate a transaction between your fiat money into this digital asset, and then there's several ways of keeping it safe by either having a wallet on your phone, desktop, or a hardware wallet which is completely disconnected from the internet, which is what I recommend if you're going to hold any substantial amount of wealth in cryptocurrencies, because if you don't know how to manage it, the thing about crypto is it allows you to be sovereign, and when you're sovereign, you're fully responsible over the management of your money. These things aren't insured, so if you lose it, it's a problem. However, just because I believe that we're going to see some tough economic times and that we may see a transition in the monetary system, I truly believe that things like gold and silver are also going to play a huge role. It's just that in a digital age, what kind of vehicle will we be able to use to transact digital value? So if that's something that you're interested in, I'd be more than happy to help you with, but go ahead.
Hang on. Thank you. I was wondering, what if you needed some assistance with managing your
So there will, yes, there will be custody. I mean, they already have companies that specialize in custody of it. So in other words, there will be institutions that will help you manage your cryptocurrency. I think it will be around for a while. However, it's contradictory, and it defeats the purpose of cryptocurrency when you have to use a third party to help you manage the money. But I do understand that there will be a period of time in this transition where institutions will be established in order to manage people's money. And I would just say that if that is the route that you have to go, do your best to learn how the fastest possible way. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, go ahead.
I understand that there's a minimum investment for crypto. I saw something like it's minimum 25 grand to get into crypto.
No. In fact, give you an example. Bitcoin itself, even though it's sitting around $6,000 a Bitcoin, it's divisible by 8 decimal points. So even though there will only ever be 21 million of them, it's divisible by 8 decimal points. And so you could buy a fraction of a fraction. I could take my phone right now. I could actually show you. I could take my phone, use an application, which is an exchange, that's hooked to my bank account. I could press buy, and I could buy $5 or $10. And then what you want to do with that money is you want to move it off the exchange and move it into your own wallet. And that's something, again, that I am trying to teach people how to do. But yeah, there is no minimum.
What's the best app if we want to look at something on our phone? Is there an app that we can look at for acquiring, purchasing, exchanging, using Bitcoin?
Yeah, there's an application in the iTunes store and also the Google store. It's called Coinbase. It's the most trusted third-party exchange in America that allows you to get into these assets.
Does it draw interest?
So in other words, there are mechanisms, there are companies that will hold your cryptocurrency and give you interest on it. Some of them will even give you 6% interest on it. However, the amount of money that people will most likely make, and this is just my personal opinion, in this transition and in this emergence of a new asset class, just the simple adoption rate and supply and demand economics, the amount of money that people will make will be 1,000x. So, you know, I think as it evolves, there'll be more institutions that offer interest on you storing your cryptocurrency with them. Go ahead.
I had a question. I would think that a very low percentage of the world's physical gold is really lost over any period of time. You said that in these short 10 years, that a fourth of all Bitcoins have been lost forever. How does that happen, and what happened to their owners' wealth that represented?
So that happened primarily because in the early days of Bitcoin, it was extremely hard in order to manage your wealth in it, but that technology has evolved, just like most technologies have evolved, and it's gotten much easier to purchase, hold, and manage your money due to the applications that are built around it. But then also you have to remember, I mentioned about the emergence of when something becomes money, it's first a collectible, and then it becomes a store of value, then it becomes a medium of exchange, and then it becomes a measure of value. Well, in that collectible stage, the first 5 years, people were just sharing this stuff. It was a bunch of nerds on their computers just sharing this stuff, and then they got rid of their old computer and they never thought it would become anything, and then they're like, well, crap, I have $1 million. Like, I gotta get into that hard drive. But they already threw the hard drive away because they didn't expect.
There's an episode of Big Bang. If you want to see it, look up Big Bang online and the episode.
Yeah, so to answer your question, a large majority of those were lost due to its infancy stage and people just experimenting with it.
So, for my simple mind here, I just use my currency or my coins and go to somewhere in cyberspace and give them my money for digital money.
Yeah, so it would be like imagine a company. Let's pretend that company is Google, okay? But it's not, all right? Just so you have a visualization. Google's a real company with real employees, and Google builds financial instruments and technology, right? Google essentially is a network. They built a network. Well, what you do is you take your money and you would go to a company that's familiar with this network, and that you would give them your money. They would then buy this cryptocurrency that's built on this network, and then they would allow you access to it because you're swapping between the two. They know how to access the network, but then also the thing is publicly traded. So in other words, people are always looking to sell their cryptocurrencies for cash, and so they just facilitate that trade as well.
And then I'd have to use my phone or whatever to be able to use that to pay something, pay for something.
Yeah, so so perfect example would be, have you ever seen people walk up to Quick Trip or some other store and scan their phone to the credit card reader? Have you ever seen that? It'd be just like that.
So is my understanding right, like this is essentially what started out as a computer program by some nerds that were playing around, and they've set all the rules, and now it's just being played out with this arbitrary limit of 21 million Bitcoins, is that?
So the way that you have to think of computer code, Bitcoin was initiated, it's an open source software. It was initiated by somebody under the name Satoshi Nakamoto, okay? People don't necessarily know who he is because he wanted to be anonymous. Imagine if you were going to try to create a competing currency. You don't necessarily want the government to know who you are, but that software was made available to anybody and everybody to download and to use. But the beautiful thing about it being an open source software is, just like geometry, you can look at the makeup of it, you can look at how it works and not doubt it at all. We don't know who the creator of geometry was, we just know that it works. So any engineer can dive into the Bitcoin code and validate that it's authentic, right, true, and honest. Go ahead.
Matt, you mentioned negative interest rates earlier. You might explain to our assembly what effect negative interest rates are having in the Scandinavian countries on the bank accounts.
So I am unfamiliar with the Scandinavian situation. However, I can tell you how negative interest rates work, which is they're essentially, you as a depositor of your money will put it in the bank, and the bank will take that money, essentially penalizing you. I would classify it as a penalization. They would take your money and then they would give it to people. In other words, like let's say you borrowed out a loan. Let's say you loaned some money from the bank. Well, instead of having to pay $1,000 back, you get to pay $900 back. So economically, it just doesn't stand strong.
Any other questions? How do we get in touch with you if we need to?
If you got something to write with, it's cryptomore.com. That's 2 O's.
Cryptomore.com, more with 2 O's.
Yeah, E on the end, yep. MOORE.com, Cryptomore.
Right, let's give it up for Matt. Thank you so much. And he'll be around for some questions.
So this is it for the evening. So thank you guys for coming.